not controlled by no set, not loyal to no party, not loyal to nobody's telling me what to do. And that really is when you gain your greatest ability to manifest. That's when you truly are carrying the power of God, because you become God of your own universe.
Look down, I see the stars. Look down, I see the stars. Look down, I see the stars.
Welcome, everyone. This is an episode of Justice Unveiled. I am attorney Darryl Robinson. I have more than 26 years of civil and criminal defense in the area of civil litigation, civil rights, personal injury, and felony defense. Today, we want to discuss two controversial Supreme Court decisions, one in the area of affirmative action and the other in the area of student loan debt. Many predominantly white universities and colleges developed affirmative action plan in the 1960s and 70s as they struggled to attract people from historically disadvantaged and underrepresented communities. Policies were created back then to promote greater inclusion of women and minorities. And since the 1970s, there have been challenges to the affirmative action program, but the Supreme Court has upheld it 3 times on the ground that institutions have a compelling interest to address past discriminations that shut non-white students out of higher learning. And they've also agreed with the arguments that more diverse student bodies promoted cross-racial understanding in terms of that. And so that is the history of affirmative actions, because as you recall, back in the 60s and 50s, minorities weren't allowed in certain universities, particularly public universities. So it was important from that perspective to create affirmative action programs that gave them admissions to higher universities. The majority of students went to HBCUs, and they weren't allowed to some of the major universities as far as that is concerned. So affirmative action programs allow minorities to get admission to a lot of the major universities and to create diverse environment on those universities' campus, which was good for the university, it was good for the country, and so forth. So now, this many years later, the Supreme Court premises is that affirmative action is no longer needed. Well, I disagree, and a whole lot of other individuals disagree in terms of that. I don't think the Supreme Court is saying that a diverse student body is not good for the university. They're just saying that universities need to come up with another way, instead of using just race, to create diversity as far as their campuses are concerned. So that's basically the history of affirmative action. In the first case, there was a 6-3 decision overturning affirmative action involving 2 universities, Harvard University under Title VII, because they're a private school that receives federal funding, and North Carolina University under the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause, which prohibits racial discrimination by government entities. North Carolina is a public institution. In both cases, the Supreme Court stated that race can't be used for admission of students on the basis of race alone. They narrowed it down, affirmative action, and where the university's got to come up with some type of compromise in creating diversity as far as that is concerned. So the issue really is what is the implications that this is going to have going forward in terms of creating diversity and the student body at universities, whether they're at Ivy League schools or whether they're at state schools. Universities have a great interest in creating a diversified workforce, the student body, because our nation is diversified. And so they want to give opportunities that reflect our greater nation in terms of the minorities as well as the majority population here in America. And so they have a mission. In terms of Harvard University, in my opinion, just specifically seek minorities who are qualified. It's not as if they're admitting minorities who are unqualified, but minorities who are qualified who may otherwise not consider Harvard, because they're intimidated by Harvard or because they don't have the money. When you look at it from a cost standpoint, which I think is even a greater conversation that we need to have, the cost of attendance annually at Harvard, including room and board, is $80,000. Stand 4 years, that's $320,000, which is cost prohibitive for most families. So Harvard seeks those who are qualified. If they reach a certain threshold income, previously it was $75,000 total income household, they would go to Harvard for free. And now it's $85,000. University of North Carolina, in response to affirmative action ruling coming down, has stated that anyone in the state of North Carolina who comes from a household income of $80,000 or less can attend a university for free. So there are other ways in which you can achieve a diversified student body, which is still important for the education and furtherance of the interests of our nation as far as that is concerned. So, but the university is going to have to work a little harder in terms of that. Now, the public universities are much larger than the private universities. And the truth of the matter is prior to the affirmative action being ruled down, there was not a great percentage of minorities attending these universities in the first place. Let's be honest with ourselves. And so there are 9 states that currently already outlaw affirmative action. And if you look at their minority attendance before they outlaw versus what they outlaw now, they've only dropped a few percentage points as far as that are concerned, because the universities have probably used other measures, for example, economics, to get students to diversify their student body. So that's important to take a look at that as far as that is concerned. Going forward, though, I think that the bigger argument is really affordability of higher education. I mean, what's the use of letting everyone in school when, in fact, higher education is becoming cost prohibitive these days in terms of that. So we can allow folks to go to these universities, but they have to be able to afford to go to these universities. And that's where the second case come in handy in dealing with student loan debt. I think they go hand in hand. One of the reasons why President Biden and his administration wanted to relieve 43 million people in terms of student loan debt, low income would be relieved of $20,000 and all the others would be relieved of $10,000 in debt, is because student loan debt is oppressive. A lot of students these days are coming out of college with at least 6 figures worth of student debt. And so while $10,000 and $20,000 only is a dent in the debt that they owe, there's at least a good start. I think a further conversation that needs to take place is creating affordable higher education. How do we make it affordable? Cost of attending higher institutions is skyrocketing today, and it will continue to increase. And so the affirmative action or creating a diversified student body is just a piece of it. But affordability is probably even a greater piece, because why put so much effort in admitting students into campuses and then leaving them with an extreme amount of high debt? And so it is something that will oppress them. It will prevent them from becoming homeowners down the road. It prevent them from starting families earlier. It prevent them from investing in their future, planning for retirement. It becomes very oppressive in the future as far as that is concerned. So while we think that the ruling in affirmative action is disappointing, because if you look at the admission standard that Harvard has, it includes also legacy students, which is actually the next lawsuit that's going down to eliminate legacy admissions. And oftentimes legacy admissions, well, at least the study says that 70% of legacy admissions are from white families. And so, and in those cases too, some of the legacy admissions are not as qualified as some of the minority students. So that's something that we're going to have to reconcile with. And we'll let that wind through the course before we start to really give extreme comments on that particular case. But they also allow students in based upon athletics and other criteria as far as that is concerned. So a lot of those things need to be looked at as far as higher admission. Harvard is one of those schools that could address the issue by saying, for example, that we're not going to accept standardized tests anymore. I mean, you can find a 4-point student at just about any school, particularly in the inner city. So they can look strictly on the basis of grades, and then look at things aside from grades, such as extracurricular activities, background, family experiences, hardships, and so forth, to determine who they're going to admit on those bases as far as that is concerned. So from a merit standpoint, I think you can find students who have very good grades a dime a dozen. The standardized test, I think, is a little trickier, because if you have the money, you can pay professionals to teach you how to take a standardized test. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're smart enough than a student who couldn't afford to pay for the same level of services. So that's a little tricky. Yeah, you can boil it down to the school you go to and say this school is better than that school from a high school standpoint, but and say that a 4.0 here is not the same as a 4.0 there as far as that is concerned. But I'm sure the universities have already dived into that to determine whether or not a student is capable of passing or being successful in terms of their campus. At the same time, some of these universities offer assistance for students who come out, because there are a number of factors that affect the students being able to perform on campus, and it's not just all academic. Some students are for example, have grown up in a non-diverse environment. And so all of a sudden they're far away from home and they're in a diverse environment. They don't have any friends or relatives. So their first year, they spend a lot of time emotionally coping with this new experience. So that may affect their performance as far as that is concerned. If there's financial situation, everyone who's admitted to college obviously don't necessarily have the financial means. And so sometimes they're worried about their ability to be able to afford, put food on the table, buy books. Attending university is expensive. We look at not just the cost of tuition or room and board, but fees, books, in terms of that, and just your regular maintain your lifestyle while you're on the campus. So it's important to take all those things in consideration. I think that despite the Supreme Court ruling, in my personal opinion, that the universities will do a good job in trying to create a diversified environment. And it's important that they do so because particularly when you're dealing with public schools, for example, the Power 5 conferences, they have a lot of minorities who play in sports. And so that may start to impact some of their decisions in terms of where they want to play. I mean, if you're an African-American athlete and you're a 5-star athlete, I think you want to play in front of a diverse crowd. You want people in the crowd see you play that look like you, come from the similar backgrounds as you in terms of that. So that's something that has to be considered by these universities too. So as far as that is concerned. In terms of the student loan debt, typically it was called the HEROES Act. So the Secretary of Education was given certain autonomy to make adjustments or additions to those provisions based upon national emergency. In fact, it is the same act that Donald Trump used to put a hold on students paying on their loans. In this particular case, Biden administration asked the Secretary of Education to forgive student loans debts for low economic students to the tune of $20,000, for all the rest $10,000. The Supreme Court stated that the Secretary of Education exceeded her authority. They said that the act does not allow her to transform or rewrite the statutes. And so she was rejected in terms of that. And the plaintiffs in this case, ironically, are 6 states. 6 states. And these states basically said that the Secretary exceeded her authority in giving out the loan forgiveness program. Now, these states, they had no dog in the fight. It's not as if they were going to lose any money over them loan forgiveness. I think the decision and the student loan debt is really about, it's kind of political, right? So if Biden administration, which is part of the Democratic Party, were allowed to they said at least 43 million, half of those individuals, their student loan debt would have been forgiven in totality. So if you have 43 million students who receive student loan forgiveness, that's chances are they are adult and they're voting people. So with a new election coming up, this particular ruling has not only just financial implications, but also political implications. And so that's one of those things. So hopefully the administration hasn't given up, and they said they haven't. I think student loan forgiveness is a real issue right now in terms of with the rising interest rates. You know, I'm seeing that some of the student loans are 8 and 9%, and at the cost of tuition continuously skyrocketing, these students who are going into college this fall, right? Imagine the amount of debt they're going to deal with coming out in 4 years, and some of them even take 5 years to graduate. And this doesn't even take into consideration a professional degree, law degree, a medical degree, or an MBA. And so we have to be really concerned about student loan debt going forward, and not just from a minority standpoint, but from an overall population standpoint in terms of that, and how it's going to impact us with individuals being in this type of debt. And so that's what's important. So this, I'm more concerned about the affordability of higher education in terms of that. I think affirmative action is a real issue, but I still think that you can find diversified candidates, you know, in terms of that. And the economic or income threshold, I think, is a good first step, but I think they need to go further in that area. But once you get to the point of admitting the student, they have to be able to afford to go to that university, and they have to be able to maintain, you know, a livable standards when they leave the university. It can't be strapped with $200,000 and $300,000 debt for the next 30 years. That'll prevent them from being able to do a whole lot of things. And so that's important too. So I think both of these rulings are connected. They're both important rulings, and they're both rulings that are going to have an impact on our society at large, not just minorities, but the majority also, because the majorities are the one that attend the universities, and the majorities are the one that take out student loans. And so it's very important that we take this in consideration. So the universities have a lot of work to do going from here on now in terms of that. And on Justice Unveiled, this is how I feel about it. This is what's important, and this is why we want to address this today. Thanks. So if you have all these universities going after these students with 4.0s, these students have a lot of choices. And so some universities, in order to create diversity, had no other choice but to make offers to students who they may otherwise wouldn't consider from a merit-based standpoint in order to create diversity. That's the reason why. Remember, we were 400 years behind. So if we're 400 years behind, there's a greater percentage of us who wouldn't have excelled at the point where affirmative action policies was created. So if you take all the top universities and Ivy League schools in the world, and they said, hey, I want a stud who's a 4.0, or, they got these advanced courses, a 4.3. How many scholarships do you think an African-American valedictorian at a public school is going to have? It's going to have 20 of them. So if I can't get him, can I get the next person? If I can't get that person, can I get the next person? That's what typically ends up happening. Whereas in the majority white population, you probably they got a whole bunch of people to choose from. So they don't necessarily have to fight over it in terms of that. And to me, that's really, so the opponents of affirmative action, to me, are targeting the wrong segment, because for one thing, the United States benefits from educating its population. So instead of preventing people from getting educated, they should find ways. That's why that whole funding comes in, and being able to affordability. Because if we can't find enough engineers, we don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough nurses, we don't have enough physicists, assistants, but we got 300 million people. Let's train the people we have. Why are we sending all this work overseas? That's what trips me out. Why are we fighting to keep people from getting educated, and then we complain we don't have enough people? Now they say we don't have enough skilled labor to work, because now, a lot of the manufacturing labor now is skilled labor, right? A lot of computers and everything coming. AI is coming, but AI is not going to replace a lot of these jobs. You're still going to have a job shortage in terms of that. And so they're sending a lot of stuff overseas. Why are we sending all these jobs overseas? And we can train these people over here to do it. So, and to me, that's really what that's about. The people are too narrow-sighted in terms of what's the best benefit for the country. They're too narrow-sighted. And so they're looking at it just from a race standpoint, as if somebody is taking something from them, when we have hundreds of universities for people to be able to attend in terms of that. And we have a population that needs to be educated in order to be able to deal with the next wave of technology that's coming through. Otherwise, we're going to be behind. And then we complain about China stealing our secrets. Well, you're sending a business over there. You see what I'm saying? The best way to protect it is to keep it home, right? And we know the reason they're going over there, because it's more cost effective in terms of that. They like to talk out of both sides of their mouth in terms of sending stuff overseas, and something is wrong with that. But the problem is that why the politicians are having that conversation, the corporations are keeping silent because they know why they're over there. Why hire an individual over here, whether minority or otherwise, and pay them $35 an hour when you can get $10 an hour over China? You see, their primary goal is to enrich the shareholders and the owners of the company. That's really what it is. They don't want to bring that manufacturing back. When Donald Trump was in office, he kept saying they were going to bring that none of them companies brought that manufacturing back. No, you know how much money it costs to go? And one thing, too, they don't want to deal with the unions. That's nothing. You don't want to deal with the unions. You don't have to deal with that overseas, right? Because the government runs everything, right? They can tell people what to do and what not to do in terms of that. But the unions are very powerful here in the United States and over in Europe. Europe actually has the Labor Party. So very, very powerful. And the cost of manufacturing goods here in Europe is much more expensive than it is over in Asia and India. So that's why they're over there. Cheap cost, cheap wage labor, cheap costs of manufacturing, cheap labor. You can pay them less in terms of that. They're qualified. I'm not saying that they're not, but we can have just as many qualified people. We're just willing to educate them. Try to keep, why are we fighting this hard?
Less.
Yes, we just can't pay them less. That's the key. You can't pay them less over here. Yeah, they know because the union's gonna step in. Look at it. Look, they're trying to unionize Starbucks. They're trying to unionize Amazon. You see, once they get in there, they got you. They're gonna strike because now the law allows them to strike because they're union.
They're legally protected.
Now they're legally protected. And so now they can ask you for what they do at Amazon now, $28 an hour. That's right. They all going up now, and so they can do that. Although a lot of that was generated by COVID-19 and the shortage of workers, Amazon, Target, and Walmart went up on terms of their wage.
The hospitals went up too.
Hospital went up too?
Oh yeah, because the nurses was going out and they got agencies now. So the agencies can send the nurses to these different hospitals with shortages, and the agencies pay them. The agencies pay them a lot.
Wow.
So the hospitals had to keep their full-time staff.
They
had to
going to the agencies.
Yeah, they had to try to compete. Even for us, they raised us.
Wow.
So.
But see, that's what happens. And that's what happens. You're not going to get away from that. But there's certain services like that. You're right. Certain services, medical services, other services you can't outsource, obviously. But so you're bound by what. But let's be honest. We have some filthy rich people here. They can afford to give us a little bit of that money.
Yeah.
Come on.
And you seen when COVID hit, they was always talking about before COVID, they were the budget, they didn't have it. But as soon as COVID hit, that money magically came from somewhere.
Did it? Right. Yeah, that money came. And so that's what trips me out. It's just people that don't want to give up anything because they can afford to. It's not like it's going to break anybody. It's just the rich wants to get richer. And at the expense of the rank and file is what I call it, the working man. They just want to get richer. That's why universities for a long time never taught entrepreneurship in school because they train you to work for somebody else. In terms of that. And so it wasn't until people started dropping out of these major schools like Bill Gates and they started becoming rich and people said, I don't need to go to college to become rich. And that's one of the things I didn't address that I wanted to address is too, because a lot of people look at this affirmative action thing and be like, oh, the world is empty. So what people need to understand is that they don't need to college to become successful. College is one avenue. You don't need to become Harvard. In fact, you have examples of successful people who have not finished school or people who went to the ranking, like a mid-major school, like Illinois State or a Power 5 conference like Illinois and or Purdue or Michigan or Arizona or Washington or California, UCLA. So, in terms of that, that's just one piece of the pot. That doesn't give you the drive that you need. Every day I'm hustling, college ain't gonna teach you that. You ain't learning that in college. In terms of that. So you have to develop that work ethic and it has to come. And so that's one of the things I wanted to get into that I did miss. You got to develop that work ethic as far as that is concerned. And you can be successful. Because I don't want people to think that because affirmative action is all now suddenly there's no hope. Because young folks may be seeing it that way. No, there's still a lot of avenues. Skilled trades in terms of that. You can get an education at other schools who everyone don't require 4.0. You can go to some of the mid-majors like Illinois State, Eastern Illinois, and you can get in with a 3.2, 3.1, be average. Get an education in terms of that. The better schools, that's why I always tell people, the better schools only impact where you start, but not where you finish. So you may start with a better paying job, you may start with a bigger corporation, but down the road, they all end up at the same company. Because once you get 3 to 5 years experience, the same company that wouldn't hire you out of college is gonna come knocking on your door. And so that's what ends up happening. So you should need to understand that too, as far as that is concerned. But if you want to be in entrepreneurship, you don't need to go to Harvard to be an entrepreneur.
No. You need to create something.
Right.
And have some funding behind it.
Yeah. Right. Save some of your money, whatever, regardless of what job you do. I'll tell people your first focus is to generate some cash.
Cash flow, yeah.
Yep. Once you have cash, now you start generating some ideas. Now you got the money to fund those ideas. Now work hard at putting together that idea so it can materialize and you can be an entrepreneur. Then you look back on these people and say, well, and that's what ends up happening. So yeah, we want people to really understand that.
Luxury Productions.